Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar called The True Experience of One, Personalizing the Mobile Shopping Experience. I'm Debbie House, Editor-in-Chief of Retail TouchPoints, and I'll be moderating today's presentation. We have a great presentation for you today that will provide insights into the business benefits behind truly personalizing the mobile experience. For today's presentation, we're using GoToWebinar. Right now, you should be viewing the GoToMeeting slide, which shows part of the control panel, including the area that shows you how to submit questions during the live presentation. All the instructions you need to view the presentation and submit questions is accessible on this control panel. We also welcome you to follow this webinar on Twitter using the #MobileShopping hashtag. For those of you who might be new to Retail TouchPoints, here's a quick overview. We're an all-digital media company publishing a weekly email online newsletter, daily news, special reports, and multimedia presentations. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our weekly newsletter. We welcome input and feedback through traditional means, phone and email, and social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Our website is www.retailtouchpoints.com. Before I introduce today's speaker, I just want to remind our audience that the presentation is slated for approximately 30 to 35 minutes with time for live questions at the end. Please submit your questions again in the GoToWebinar dashboard as they come to mind. Our speaker has agreed to stay online following the presentation to respond to your questions. And then I want to point out a few other housekeeping items for the attendees. This webinar is being recorded, and all attendees will receive an archive link to the presentation to go back and review or share with colleagues. In addition, the slides will be posted to SlideShare. That link will be provided at the end of the presentation. So our speaker today will be Mark Laux, who's the Vice President of Channel Development for Certona. Mark is an industry thought leader, seasoned sales and marketing executive with a wealth of experience in interactive advertising, behavioral segmentation, and one-to-one marketing. Prior to Certona, Mark was a VP Business and Channel Development at Touch Commerce. He's held senior positions at several technology and marketing strategy firms, including Omnichannel, Rogers Townsend, and Darcy Macias Benton & Bowles. And he has pioneered industry-leading customer intelligence and one-to-one marketing programs for Fortune 1000 clients. Among his many accomplishments, Mark has helped develop predictive media mix optimization models, the Internet's first interactive flash greeting cards, and the automotive industry's first online vehicle configuration system. Now, before I turn the presentation over to Mark, I just wanted to share a bit of information and an overview of a survey we recently conducted in conjunction with Certona, which Mark will share additional insights on during his part of the webinar. So first, this slide just shows you that this was a collaboration between, again, Retail TouchPoints and Certona, and we also received input from Greg Smitzer, who's the CEO of Mad Mobile, a leading mobile platform provider, when we were putting together our survey questions. And in total, we received responses from 136 retailers and 14 CPG suppliers. So this survey brought in a cross-section of retail executives from various industries, as you can see in this chart. Apparel and accessories, specialty, non-apparel, but in addition, in the other area, you can see that we have grocery, automotive, home improvement, and sporting goods retailers as well. And on the next slide, you can see that we also had survey respondents with differing perspectives related to overall revenue. And it really ranged across the board from under 25 million to over 1 billion and in between. So on this slide, you can see that the primary reason for the focus on mobile in this survey is that the channel as a whole is receiving a great amount of attention, and industry entities, e-tail here, for example, point out that mobile is the biggest growth area in the next year. Additionally, driving the point home further, Javelin Strategy and Research predicts that the mobile channel will bring in $20 billion in revenue by the end of 2012. And in our survey, we found that close to 72% of retailers believe their revenue from mobile will top 10% by year's end. And this is a big jump from 2010, when there were only 13% of retailers who made this same prediction. So now that I've set the stage, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Mark, who will share some additional insights, survey results, and some real-world case study examples. Welcome to you, Mark.
Thanks a lot, Debbie, for setting up, and I'd like to welcome everybody to our webinar today. I think it's really interesting what's going on in mobile, and it's a very exciting time, both from a technology perspective as well as from a consumer engagement perspective. So I'm really excited to share some more of the results, and as well as share some of the learnings and case studies and things that we have today. So I think one of the things that just to kind of set the stage, I'd like to share a little bit of the research and really look at kind of what are brands doing. And based on the research that we did, we asked what stage are companies in. And I think that when you look at this, you kind of look at research and learning and program and development representing about 61%. And I think that that's really a good indication, and really based on all of the different brands that we speak to day in and day out, and from all the different information that we have available, this is a very fast-moving adoption curve for this technology. And I think in some ways it's caught retailers off guard as far as how fast things are moving. And I think if you look at kind of this next slide, it really shows you how fast this adoption rate is. And so when you look at it over time, from telephone and different media adoption rates, radio, television, computer, the mobile phone had about the same adoption rate as the television. When you look at the smartphone, it's considerably faster. And then when you look at the tablet, it's extremely fast. And even more so, I think, to reach a 40% adoption rate for penetration, when you look at the smartphone, again, extremely fast as an adoption rate. So basically, consumers have moved extremely fast into this adoption of this technology. And as a result, it's really created a situation where brands have to respond more quickly to really adapt to it, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So primarily I'm going to have 5 areas of focus for the presentation today. One is strategizing for the mobile implementation, then using mobile to personalize the experience, then omnichannel versus multi-channel. There's a lot of talk about omnichannel, and we'd like to really address that a little bit and how we view that today. And then honing in on a mobile improvement strategy, so really talking about, what are the things that you should focus on, how should you go about it, and then choosing the right mobile platform partner. So when you think about, strategizing for mobile implementation, I think there's some, really specific things that you should look at. And I think primarily what you need to look at is how are consumers interacting with your brand. And I think that, when you think about kind of the touch points that you have with consumers, so if you're a traditional bricks and mortar, or if you're an e-com play only, or if you have multiple channels that you're dealing with, you have to really understand your consumers. And I think, sometimes I think that, there's all this talk of, should I build an app? Should I, optimize my site for mobile? Where should I really focus my attention? And I think if you look, really, I think it should be driven by the analytics. I think if you look at your website statistics and are able to analyze kind of, what is the amount of traffic that's being driven through mobile and tablet, what is that traffic actually doing? I think, you're going to have the best opportunity to optimize the largest number of consumers by creating a really good mobile optimized site. So I think that, one of the things that's talked about a lot today is conversion rates, and that conversion rates are considerably lower with mobile versus desktop. And I think that, there's two things. One is maybe people are not wanting to buy on mobile, which is one point of view. The second point of view is maybe the experience does not allow consumers to buy easily. So I think if you look at both of those, probably if you don't have a mobile optimized site, it's really difficult to say that people are not engaged in wanting to purchase or convert through their mobile phones. And I think the other thing that's important is when you look at the website visits, and this is data 2010 versus 2011 holiday, if you look at the data, basically mobile and tablet are actually cannibalizing the traffic that so you can see this cannibalization of the desktop traffic. And basically NRF states that over 50% of the traffic to e-commerce websites by 2014. So basically having over 50%. So you can see that over time that this trend's going to continue, and that basically if you're depending on revenue from your desktop traffic and your conversion rates don't improve via mobile and tablet, that you're actually going to see a decrease in revenue through your e-commerce efforts and mobile efforts. So it's really important to focus on this, and I think, not to be alarmist, but I think it's really important for brands to understand, what that trend is doing and basically how fast it's happening. I think that, one of the most important things to understand about mobile is, when you think about it, it's a very small piece of real estate. So opposed to the desktop or laptop, where you have a considerable amount of real estate to deal with, you're very limited on real estate and how you engage with consumers. So personalization becomes key in really engaging consumers, because the other thing with handheld devices is that consumers tend to have less patience. So I think, one of the things that's really important is to understand that you have to get the right things in front of those consumers. And I think a strategy where all things are the same for all people is not going to be effective, and you're really going to see a negative impact from as far as a consumer experience and the level of engagement that they have with your brand. So, personalization really becomes key when you talk about mobile and tablet from a consumer experience and usability perspective. So, when you think about, I know people who, my phone is by my bed, every night. It's a very personal device. It's more personal than a laptop or a desktop, and the handheld is with most people wherever they go. So the fact that it is so personal, and the fact that it's explicit to an individual, where in the past you would see, or even today you see desktops that are shared by family members at home and different things like that. When you're dealing with a handheld device, 99% of the time it's going to be explicit to that consumer. So out of any type of touch point besides in-store in person, explicitly that you're dealing with a single individual, and you have the opportunity to personalize and create a great experience for that consumer. The other thing from an omni-channel perspective is, because it's a 24/7 device, and because people have it with them all the time, you're not just touching them from home or from work. It could be anywhere they are, anytime. So understanding context, where that consumer is, what they're doing, is much more important. And I think the other really important thing is that it really impacts across channels. So when you think about kind of omni-channel versus multi-channel, I think probably the easiest way to kind of define it is that multi-channel really represents that I have more than one channel. And when we talk about multi-channel, we're talking about primarily that there's different silos. And I think that one of the really important things that you have to understand is that when you're dealing with multi-channel, you may have personalized and good experiences within the store for consumers, or within the website and e-commerce for consumers, or within the call center for consumers. But what omni-channel is really saying is I need to understand that consumer across all of the touch points. So if I'm a multi-channel retailer, it's fine that I have good experiences for them in the disparate channels, but omni-channel is all about understanding that consumer at everywhere that they touch and having integration. And I think that, there are some barriers to that within organizations. I'm going to get into a couple of kind of case studies here to talk about different e-commerce companies and what they're doing to change the way that they engage with their consumers. So in this case, it's a traditional cataloger, and I think really what's important is they're looking at their consumers. Tablets are with a 40% penetration with tablets. They have a great opportunity, and with mobile, to basically engage consumers in a new way. And the difference between kind of a print catalog and what can be done digitally becomes an experience that can be truly a one-to-one experience. So basically understanding that consumer, understanding their past purchase history, understanding how they've engaged with the brand, preferences, all of those things, not to mention reducing the cost of distributing print catalogs. So, the benefit of both being able to engage with a catalog in a way that's not necessarily linear. And, I think many of the catalogers are doing some interesting things, but specifically one is creating kind of a catalog that you engage with. You can also purchase from the catalog, but there's some interesting, kind of ways that they tied between the traditional print catalog and the digital catalog. So the fact that you can circle items within the catalog with your finger to save for later, save them to a list. You can have multiple lists, so if you have gifts or you're thinking about multiple rooms or different things that you want to purchase, you have the ability to do this. The other benefit is that you can pick like an anchor product. So you could select an anchor product within the catalog and then shake the device, and actually it will surround that anchor product with other products that are recommended based on that person's personal preferences and what they may like. The thing is that it provides really unprecedented new opportunity for brands to really engage in a very personal level and really take the catalog to an entirely new level. The other benefit is they can certainly go to the call center, but they can purchase from right within the catalog through the online e-commerce. I think the other thing that's important is, this is an example from Peapod, and I think we have to rethink where the store is or what is a store. So in this case, these are actually, Peapod just opened 150 stores after they did a test in a couple of markets. And these are actually billboards within subways. And as you can see, there's rows of products here where you can actually, with the Peapod application, scan those products while you're standing waiting for the subway, for the train for 5 or 10 minutes. And the products that you scan will be added to your list and delivered to your home that day. So basically looking at, products that are consumables that you need, milk, bread, cereal, all of those kind of standard products. And, using data, they looked at kind of what were the best products to put in there and, what were the most likely products. But again, I think what's the really interesting thing here is Peapod was looking at their consumers, their busy lives. Nobody likes to, most people don't like to go to the grocery store, which is why Peapod is successful in having products delivered to the home as their model. But I think what's important is really understanding your consumer, understanding their lifestyle, and how can you improve or provide convenience to those consumers in a way that makes their life easier. So I think this is a great example of leveraging both technology and understanding consumers and their lifestyle. I think silos is, when we say avoid silos, I think the most important thing, and I touched on a little bit, kind of multi-channel versus omni-channel. I think one of the issues that is probably standing in the way more than anything of many organizations' ability to respond to what's going on in the marketplace as it relates to mobile and tablets is that, data is stored in silos, so within POS, from a store perspective, traditional bricks and mortar perspective, there's silos of POS data, inventory, all of those items are stored in systems that may or may not be integrated with other channels like e-commerce, and when you look at call centers as well. So I think because the way that our organizations are set up, and just because of the way they've developed over the years, there's really a challenge from that perspective to get that true 360-degree view of the customer and create a true omni-channel experience for those consumers. So I think one of the biggest challenges that faces organizations is they really need to have C-level support and be able to kind of break down those walls and make sure that there's the right people are engaged. Because what's happening when you have a consumer that engages online, then on the phone, then may be in the store, maybe on the call channel, treating that consumer as a different person in each of those touch points is not going to fly moving forward, because as there are a lot of retailers and your competitors who are facing this same problem, and they're looking at ways to do this. And basically, the organizations that are effectively breaking down those barriers and understanding the consumer across touch points is going to have definitely a competitive advantage. I think a lot of talk is going on about showrooming, and I think that different organizations have looked at it in different ways. It's definitely a threat to those retailers that have bricks and mortar stores. It's so easy for a consumer, and many of you have probably done it yourself, to go into a store, scan a product. If it's a major purchase, people are more likely to do it, but basically to go in and scan a product and buy it on Amazon while they're sitting in your store, or see that it's available down the street at your competitors for a few dollars less. Some of the ways that, kind of initially some retailers wanted to address this is, trying to not provide, internet access within their stores, to try to, kind of build a wall around their stores to prevent this. The problem is it's not going to, basically, since consumers can get through their through their mobile providers' networks and without Wi-Fi, it's much better for, it's much better for the brands to embrace the fact and provide the consumers what they want, but at the same time have a strategy to deal with showrooming and understand it. At the highest level, it can be as simple as, acknowledging that it exists and making sure that your associates within your stores are aware of this technology, aware of what's going on, and have a set policy for how they can deal with it, whether it's giving consumers a discount in store or things like that. From a technology perspective, by offering access to a network, it provides you the ability to allow to push your own scanning app or your own offers within the floor, knowing that someone is attaching to your Wi-Fi network. It gives you a really great opportunity to understand what's going on and what that consumer is doing, and the opportunity to engage with that consumer while they're in the store. So I think that showrooming is not going to stop. It's going to continue to be a part of consumer behavior, and it will grow, if anything. So I think that those companies that have a really good strategy and have thought through this, rather than fighting the trend or trying to prevent consumers from being able to do it, to engage consumers in a way that show the value that you have in providing those products to that consumer, and to try to use it as an opportunity to develop the relationship with those consumers. I think really it's important to there are a lot of opportunities out there, and I think that when you talk about applications versus websites, there's a lot of different things that you're facing, and a lot of decisions that have to be made. I think probably one of the most important things is, one of the areas where you can decide is to use kind of and this shows kind of a Google Analytics dashboard, but whether you have Omnichannel or Core Metrics or whatever, looking at your site statistics, looking at your site traffic, and looking at the consumers that come to your site, and what's the breakdown of the types of devices that are being used, and really understanding, is it mostly iPad, is it mostly iPhone, what are the kind of what is that breakdown of your consumer. Also, I think looking at the trends and seeing what the growth rate looks like for your site specifically, because, whereas, some sites are seeing as much as 300 to 400% growth year over year in mobile traffic versus desktop traffic, yours may vary. It may be higher or it may be lower. So I think understanding your specific case and understanding what do your consumers look like from a profile perspective as far as from a device perspective as well, because I think what that can do is also help you determine if you move forward beyond kind of a mobile optimized site and you decide that you want to develop a specific application for your brand, that it gives you some direction as well as what's the majority of your consumers doing from a device perspective and how should I develop for those consumers. So if 60% of my traffic, for instance, is from iPhone or iOS, then that's probably where I ought to look first to develop an application. What I will say is that, with 15, I think the stat I saw yesterday is there's 15,000 new applications every day. So I think you have to take into consideration, really what is your brand proposition and what does the app provide for those consumers. When you think about banking or you think about grocery, some of those categories, it's extremely obvious because of the nature of consumer interaction with those types of brands and the types of tasks that they have to do. So I think you really should put a lot of thought into how your consumers interact with your brand. What's the likelihood of them using, based on the frequency of their engagement with your brand, what's the likelihood of them using that application and at what frequency? Or is there, specific? So like in home improvement, you may say we're going to develop an application, but understanding that consumers will use those for a specific project or something like that just to provide convenience and to really get them engaged with your brand. So I think it's really important to understand, again, who are your consumers, what are they doing, what are their lifestyles, and how they engage with your brand. But again, I want to reinforce the most important thing is by throwing a wide net and really doing a great job of optimizing your mobile website and that presence, you're going to hit the largest number of consumers, and a lot of the experiences that you can provide through apps now through HTML5 you can provide through the experience just via your mobile optimized website. So I think, kind of when you think about, kind of the whole idea of optimizing your site, you have basically, several options. And I think that, here are some of the things that came from our research as far as what people are looking for, what brands are looking for. So device flexibility, platform expertise, innovation, ideas and initiatives, industry experience, and personalization is there as well. But I think, when you think about device flexibility, I think if you're talking to one of the major mobile platform providers, that is usually assumed because that's really what they offer. The primary core of what they do is really making sure that regardless of what device is touching your optimized site, that the best experience is being provided for that consumer based on the type of device they have. From a platform expertise, certainly expertise is a good thing, but this is a very fresh market, and a very new market, and there are new players coming in all the time. And I think, from probably the best thing you can do is, definitely speak to references because it is so new and there are so many things, and, talk to other brands that they've dealt with if you're in the selection process. But I think also, I'm kind of surprised that only 33% were, kind of concerned about innovation, because I think really if there's anything that is probably most important from this perspective is really innovation and understanding new ways to engage consumers. And I think that personalization is really another extremely important point, because without personalization, again, you're not going to engage the consumers. With the limited real estate, if they don't get to what they're looking for, if they're not engaged, they're going to move on. to another brand, to an app, or whatever. So I think it's really important that you look at a provider that has innovation. Certainly, device flexibility and platform expertise goes without saying, but I think innovation and personalization are really important. And I think industry or segment experience can benefit, or sometimes it can actually hinder you, because I think sometimes if it's kind of a stock, here's what we do for apparel, kind of companies, you may be able to, benefit something, but it may look like every other apparel, for instance, every other apparel brand site. So I think, there is certainly some, benefit to having somebody who has expertise, and it really depends on what category you're in. So I think, that's something that you have to consider on a case-by-case basis. But I think if they have innovation, certainly with the combination of, a lot of innovation and specific industry segment experience, it can certainly benefit you. And I think, the thing that really is important is you have to be realistic about it. I think some larger organizations, have chosen to create their own, develop their own mobile optimized site and develop that expertise in-house, maybe using a platform, but doing the actual work, using a platform as the core so that they can present and let a company, maintain, a third party maintain all of those understandings of all the different devices and iOSs and browser types and everything, and maintain that, but basically developing all of the creative interaction, UI, and everything themselves. And then I think, too, just looking at what is the effort required, not just to, optimize the site, or in the case of building an app, when you build an app, every time a new version of Android comes out, or a new version, the new version of the Android operating system, or the new version of the iOS operating system comes out, you have to update the app to make sure it's compatible, and as well as look at the opportunity to create more feature and functionality as those applications become richer. So, you're taking on kind of an ongoing software development process that, you may or may not be well suited to serve. And I would argue that, look at your core competency as an organization, and where are your efforts best used. So that's all I've got today, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending. We'd like to open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks for all of your insights and information and case studies. I think it was really helpful for all of our attendees. Again, the attendees can see on the screen right now, if you have any questions, you can type them in and send them over. And if we have time, we'll ask them. If not, afterwards, Mark will be able to reach out to you. So I have a few general questions from a couple of the attendees. And maybe you've probably addressed it a little bit, but maybe you can expand on it a little bit more, Mark. And the first one is just generally, why do we need a mobile platform partner?
Sure. So basically, and I mentioned it, I talked about it a little bit. I think the most important thing from a, kind of a understanding. So when you talk about delivering content through mobile, to different devices, basically, if you think about it, you just go into, the AT&T store, the Sprint store, Verizon store, whatever, and you see all the different types of smartphones. And across all of those phones, different screen sizes, different resolutions, different ways that you interact through the device, so it could be a Windows-based, it could be Android-based, could be obviously Apple iOS. So I think to understand that, most mobile platforms right now are optimizing for about 8,000 different devices. So when you think about that, that's a pretty overwhelming thing to consider to maintain from an in-house perspective. So I think, you definitely, I think in most cases you're definitely best off to look at a mobile platform provider and use them as a way to manage that kind of overwhelming task. And again, I think the different mobile platform providers go anywhere from full service to where they provide all of the services, including the creative, obviously work with you as a partner, but all of the creative, all the interaction, UI, everything that's done, and basically, use your website as a reference and build off of that. But also when you look at, companies, and all of them have differing levels of self-service capabilities. So there's also like NetBiscuits, which basically has more of an agency model where you can basically use their platform. They take care of all the underpinnings and design, making sure that whatever you build works with all of the different types of devices, but really gives you more of a user interface to allow your own team or your agency to develop the site, make changes, do all of those things. So there's kind of a, really it runs the gamut, but I think the core thing that you want to understand is that you probably don't want to create a platform or not leverage a platform to kind of manage to all of the different devices, all the different iOSs, and making sure that at the minimum that piece of optimization is taking place.
All right, great, thanks. One of our other attendees wants to know if, depending on the category or the industry segment that you're part of, does that impact whether or not you want to be looking at mobile apps or mobile websites or a combination? How do they approach that based on industry?
Yep. So again, I probably can't reinforce this enough. Get your mobile website right. I mean, that's going to be, you're going to see traffic regardless of what your segment is, or what vertical you're in within e-commerce. You're going to see that traffic continue to grow. Not everybody's going to download an app. But specifically to, yes, I think it absolutely matters what what your vertical is and what you do. And I gave examples, obviously, of Peapod, and I mentioned banking. I think those are things where consumers engage on a daily or weekly basis, and that's, very evident of the way that you need, and I would say that an app should be very high on the priority list if that's the type of company you have. Also B2B, I think if you're in the B2B segment, and again, where you have either consumable products or something where, your customers are dealing with your brand on a very high frequency, there's a lot of ways that you can create convenience for them and create a good experience for them, and apps are probably the best way to do that, beyond what you may do to optimize the mobile site. But I think really, the key to it is really understanding who your consumers are, how they interact with your brand regardless of your vertical, and really think about that and how can I improve their experience with my brand and bring value to the relationship. And if an app, and understanding what those use cases are and what the things that you think consumers would engage with, then that's where you go. And I think probably the other really important thing to understand here is I think that most brands have evangelists, and I think that once you get your mobile site really built out and have an optimized experience via mobile and tablet for consumers through your traditional e-commerce site, I think the next thing really to focus on is, if you have stores, kind of the in-store experience and tying it all together. I think when you look at it, who are your best consumers? And it's kind of the 80-20 rule, that 20% of my clients, which is true with a lot of retail, 20% of my customers represent 80% of my revenue. And I think that if you want to look at those 20% and maybe even the top 5%, are there ways that I can engage them via mobile through an application that creates an easy opportunity for them to continue to evangelize my brand? So tapping into social, because majority of consumers, I think majority of consumers access their Facebook today through Facebook, Twitter, and many of their social networks via their handheld versus their desktop. So there's a huge opportunity to create an app and create opportunity for them to evangelize and create opportunity to share, things about your brand, providing them special offers and different things that they can share out. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do, and I think really having the right partner and understanding what all the opportunities are and really understanding your consumers is what's most important.
Right, right. So how do you address the question that a retailer may ask, well, it's such a small percentage of my online sales are from mobile. How do I justify the investment or a greater investment in the channel?
Right. So I think that, I think certainly if you're e-commerce only, that, that's a challenge if you look at it today. What I will say is I think what happened last holiday was a wake-up call, and I certainly saw it in, I go to multiple mobile web shows on an annual basis and really talk to a lot of retailers, every week. And I think, it was a big wake-up call because of how fast that traffic grew. So I think although it's still a small percentage, I think what's happening is you're seeing it grow at such a quick rate. And because of the time that it takes to really do a good job and develop a strategy and to develop, an optimized mobile platform, we don't have a lot of time to react. Because again, as NRF says, when 50% of my site traffic becomes mobile by 2014, and that's the projection, and I don't see any reason that that won't happen, you don't want to have a wake-up call then. So I think, I know it's hard when, especially if you're a public company, you're trading quarter to quarter, you're looking at revenues right now, and you're looking at, where should I put my dollars. But at the same time, I think that it would, that certainly all the trends, all the data is pointing to this is where it's going. And then I would say if you have stores, you're already losing revenue or gaining revenue as a result of mobile. And that in-store revenue is a much higher number than what's going on in the e-commerce front. Mm-hmm. So I think putting a complete mobile strategy based on the channels based on what channels you operate in and understanding that, and I think really being able to make sure that the C-level and the people that need to understand see those trends and see the analytics and provide that data to make sure that the right investments are being made. I think last year the average spend was $300,000 for Fortune 500 retailers for the top 500, and that number has gone up considerably this year. So I think, again, when holiday comes around this year, and again we see another 100, 200, 300% growth in the amount of traffic that's coming through mobile devices and tablets, we're going to certainly see, a higher level of interest in investing in this because, I just think that's the trend and that's where it's going, and it really behooves you to get your ducks in a row today and create a good strategy and begin that investment now so that you're not playing catch-up in a year.
Right. And so you mentioned the amount of time it takes, and I wonder if you can expand on that a little bit. What kind of timeline should retailers expect when starting and implementing their mobile strategies? And you also mentioned the holiday season. With the holiday season fast approaching, is there anything at this point for this coming holiday season that retailers can still do?
Yeah, I think it depends on where they're at in the process. Mm-hmm. If you don't have an optimized site, it's probably too late, just based on freezes within their own organizations and as well as just the time it takes to get up and running. What I will say is if they're already on a mobile platform, there's a lot of tools out there within their existing mobile platform providers, as well as other kind of add-on providers that provide kind of what they call recipes or ways that you can actually add features and functionality within the optimized website. So, for instance, geolocated offers. I've seen a couple of different companies that offer this type of experience that's just basically a recipe that can be attached to your existing optimized mobile site. So based on geolocation, where a consumer is, if they're within, it's called geofencing. So if you're within a mile radius of one of my stores, or even a little scarier, but actually what's going on today, if you're within a mile radius of my competitor's store, I can actually push an offer to that consumer if they're engaging with my website, or if they're looking at a particular product and have done a store locator, I can push an offer to make sure that they come into the store. So there's different things that you can do kind of on top, but as far as coming up with an entire optimized mobile site and strategy for holiday, it's probably not going to happen. And I think kind of lead times are anywhere from 3 to 6 to 9 months, depending on the complexity of your site, depending on which mobile platform you provide, depending on the level of customization. There's a lot of factors, obviously, that play into it. But I think it's certainly not too soon to start to be thinking about holiday for 2013, and really getting things under control now.
Okay, great. So just a little bit more specifically now, thinking about what's happening with emails, and of course, more and more consumers are reading their emails on their phones. Are there some specific strategies retailers should employ to address that trend?
Yeah, so I think that's that's really some low-hanging fruit, and it depends on who you're, whether you send the emails yourself or whether you work with one of the email providers. But I think there's certainly a big trend in optimization of email. So when you think that something like 33% of emails sent by brands, by e-commerce brands to consumers, are being opened on the phone, and many times that experience is less than optimal. So if your HTML emails are not optimized for mobile, understanding that they're being opened by a mobile device, it makes it very difficult for consumers to engage with that content and actually either purchase or come to the site or whatever, based on that experience. So I would argue that if you have a good mobile experience for consumers on your site, and you have at least some level of optimization for mobile on the site, that's probably a place you should look immediately for to really increase. I know that click-throughs, I just heard a statistic yesterday that Dell, just by optimizing their emails for mobile, they have a 5 to 7x increased click-through on mobile devices. So I think it's low-hanging fruit, and it's something that most of the email service providers can work with you to do, or there are also third parties that do that as well. But I think it's a very important, again, another channel where you touch your consumers, and again, understanding how your consumers are getting that information and how they engage with it.
Okay, great. I have one question from an attendee who mentioned that about tracking consumers across channels, and that Omnichannel requires what's called a common key identifier to track a user across multiple touch points. How do retailers approach this issue and deal with being able to track their customer behavior?
So that is a great question, and I think that and it's probably one of the biggest challenges. I think if you look at the prevalence of rewards programs and consumer loyalty programs, that's one of the answers. It depends on what type of brand and what type of company you are, but that's probably the easiest way to create a single identifier for the consumer, because then that can be tracked in store, it can be tracked online, it can be tracked through mobile as well. The thing that mobile provides too is either through an app or through through engagement is you can have an explicit identifier for mobile, and it can tie across the store through coupon codes and different things like that. But I think the most important thing is being able to understand first in my data today, if I don't have a loyalty program, if I don't have any of those things, across my different, within the silos, right, of these different channels, is my customer ID that I use online, that I use in the store, that I use on the call center, is it unified? if it's not, that's really the first step is we need to create a unifying key for that. The other thing is obviously this is not a unique problem. Many organizations have it because each of the channels was built up on its own and doesn't necessarily have complete connection between the other channels, and consumers again are looked at in this multi-channel kind of view as opposed to an omni-channel view. So I think you may have an email in one data set and a phone number in another data set and an email in another data set, and so I think really it becomes a data issue from the perspective of really understanding what are those keys within the data across the different data sets, and how can we create a strategy moving forward to make sure that if we don't have a single customer identifier, coming up with that strategy and having one, but in the meantime, how can we look at all of the different data sets and be able to use the keys that we have across all those data sets to create a unified view of that consumer.
And one of our attendees wanted to follow up and ask you if you think that the social login, Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, can serve as an effective common identifier.
Absolutely. I think I think that there's a lot of things like that you have to think about, and I think that one of the great kind of I think both the wallets, when you talk about PayPal and the different banking wallets and things like that, is one way, because I just noticed here in California in CVS I can use PayPal to pay in the store, which I could use the same account to pay online. So I think there's a great opportunity, and social login is another great way, because basically it does multiple things. One, it creates an identifier that you can use across channels, but in addition to that, it provides data relative to shipping address and things that you can pre-populate that you can garner from that social login to make the experience, especially on mobile, where you don't want to sit there and type in all that information the first time you convert on the site and want to buy something. So leveraging those types of things where the consumer's engaging, and it also provides opportunities besides kind of the identifier. It provides opportunities for them to share back to their social network, what they bought, all of those things that then create more opportunities to generate more revenue for you through their social network. So yes, that's definitely there's a lot of opportunity and promise there.
All right, great. So I think at this point, I think we're gonna wrap up. We just have a few minutes left, and I want to thank you. I mean, you gave us so much to think about. It was a great presentation and a terrific Q&A afterwards. So again, I want to thank you, Mark, and all of our attendees. And you can see on the screen right now the link to the presentation as well as the white paper. You'll all be receiving this in an email as well, and you'll receive the white paper, which is based on the survey, titled Moving Forward with Mobile. So just finally, I just want to again thank Mark and all of our attendees, and let you know to have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mark.